Many people are thrilled and grateful when they save a dog from a shelter. But often we don't realize what hardships the dog had before finding a new home. It might be difficult to keep your beloved pet safe in your arms, even when you swear to do so. Sadly, June Roundtree was powerless to stop her rescued puppy from fleeing. She was really depressed and feared she may never see her puppy again, despite her best efforts. June has long been employed as a cashier at an Alabama Walmart. She looks forward to returning home to her husband and her rescue dog, Abby, after her daily commute to work. However, Abby was absent on November 8, 2020, the day June returned home. In the backyard, she looked for her and discovered that Abby's leash and collar were still fastened to a post in the ground. June was really depressed and asked herself, "How did this happen?" It like an awful nightmare. She got into the car right away with her husband. With weeping eyes, the pair called out for Abby as they drove in frantic circles around the area. For several nights, they did this in vain. They did, so it was like though they had lost a family member. They called nearby animal shelters and hastily contacted neighbors, telling them everything about their lab pit bull mix. June was left feeling hollow within as weeks passed with no positive news, and optimism began to wane. Nevertheless, each day she dressed in her uniform and went to work, prepared to take on the everyday turmoil that permeates Walmart. However, Walmart was agitated by a different kind of pandemonium. June was working her normal shift at register number 6 on November 28th when she heard a sudden ruckus near the ice machine. When she looked up, she saw her coworkers frantically pacing the aisles. She was initially perplexed, but then something made sense to her. "I said, it can't be," June remembered the occasion. Danielle Robinette, June's coworker and a Walmart customer care representative, also added a few words. "I was like, what in the world is happening?" Danielle said. What then transpired? What was the commotion about? A medium-sized mutt was roaming about the shop, though. "I'm a huge animal lover, so I just followed her, and she ran up to register number 6, Danielle said. We also know that by June, the 6th register had been run. This mangy mongrel reminded her so much of her lost Abby that she strained her eyes. June yelled the name, "Abby," as the familiar dog drew closer to the register, only hoping that this enigmatic dog was her lost child. June was wide-eyed and cautious as a joyful dog approached her. She didn't want to raise her expectations. June quickly examined the mystery dog's coat and noticed a prominent patch of short white hair around her neck and muzzle, a patch that June was all too familiar with. Abby was the one. I leaned over and gave her a hug. I went totally crazy. Then I was unable to talk. June exclaimed, "I just couldn't believe it," and was in total shock. The other staff members who were around them cocked their heads in bewilderment as she held Abby in a loving hug for several minutes. "This is Abby," she whispered, looking up with tears in her eyes. "She hasn't been seen in 3 weeks," Danielle stated. I was just floored. However, how did Abby locate June at the Walmart where she was employed? As you can see, June worked at a Walmart that was only 1.5 miles from her house. Although Abby had never visited the shop, June would occasionally take her on walks in the parking lot and through the woods behind it. Was Abby able to recall the route June led her? "How she knew I worked there, I do not know," June said. Clive Wynn, an author, psychology professor, and head of Arizona State University's Canine Science Collaboratory, says that while she may not have realized June would be in the Walmart, she most likely recognized the structure. "I think the dog was wandering aimlessly until it happened upon a place it knew well. I believe it is entirely conceivable and highly probable that this dog was in distress and was attempting to locate a home," Clive said. Although a dog can't navigate perfectly, it can identify certain significant, sizable locations. June thinks someone must have been taking care of Abby during her 3 weeks away from home since she returned with a lot of flesh on her bones. She remarked appreciatively, "I want to thank whoever she came upon that gave her something to eat. We kid at work that she must have known the weather was going to turn and wanted to find her way back so she could have her warm bed. June added as she laughed. It's like a dream, she said, obviously relieved that her pet was at last safe at home. This is not something you can make up. Though she doesn't want to lick and kiss your face, June Roundtree described Abby as a very affectionate dog that wants to be with you but is more laid back. What would it be like to lose a beloved pet for 3 weeks? What if it had been 4 years? While June was unable to comprehend it, another pet owner was all too familiar with it. When her beloved cat, Fuzzy, fled from her friend's house, Michelle Wright was devastated. For many weeks in July 2010, she searched her community in New Hampshire in vain for her pet. Michelle persisted in her quest for Fuzzy until she heard something from one of her neighbors that made her believe it was futile. Michelle told WTV News that she had heard from one of her friend's neighbors that a car had hit a cat that looked like him, which was really upsetting. For a long time, I was a complete disaster, and I had mostly given up, Michelle added. She felt a great deal of self-resentment, as though she could have prevented these things from happening. Even though it was true that she couldn't bear to see innocent Fuzzy dead, she had a part of her that hoped Fuzzy was still alive someplace. I was devastated, but I would always keep my eye out for him when I was in the area, said Michelle. Michelle and her spouse visited Barrington's Pet Connection pet supplies store 4 years later, but there was still no trace of Fuzzy. The sign, and by sign, we mean exactly what Michelle felt was Fuzzy's face, was finally shown to her there. A familiar-looking cat was among the animals for adoption at the Coos County Humane Society's area of the store. Molson was his name. Tell me about Molson, Michelle said. In contrast to the 4 years Fuzzy had been missing, Pet Connection had just been fostering him for around a week in order to help the Coos County shelter in New Hampshire. He had quite a story, though. You see, this Fuzzy impersonator was being cared for by the Pet Connection just before Michelle managed to return to him. It seems that the unfortunate cat has been bouncing between the shelter and households for a long time. Molson has been rehomed twice by the Coos County Humane Society. He was adopted by a lady the first time, but they lived together for just 7 months. Who would dare get rid of that mushy little face? On the second occasion, the cat was adopted by a family who eventually gave him back when they relocated out of the region. However, this was a noteworthy advance. His previous owner changed his name to Molson. Michelle said, I said I needed to know more about this cat. He looks so much like Fuzzy, I commented to my husband, and I inquired about his age. The shelter said he was 4 years old, she added. And I knew right then, Michelle clarified. Michelle felt a lot. She would demonstrate that this feline was her Fuzzy. She insisted on it a great deal. For example, that's my cat. That really does resemble my cat. I'll need to bring in some photos, said Pet Connection owner Jess Center. Then, the next day, she brought in pictures, and lo and behold, they matched up, everything. From paw prints and colors to markings and everything, he went on. It was a perfect match. Michelle started crying as she noticed the iconic black patch on the underside of his paw. I just broke down in tears. I'm not sure how or why, but I don't give a damn, Michelle said. Michelle was more than willing to pay the $85 adoption fee in order to have her beloved cat back, who she had been missing for 4 years. In order for them to always know who Fuzzy was when they were reunited, the cost also included implanting a little chip inside of him. There was love in the air. It was also a really sweet tale of how Michelle first met Fuzzy when he was a kitten. He returned to her embrace after entering her life on Valentine's Day. She connected with Fuzzy just as strongly as she had on Valentine's Day in 2009 when he was a little kitten. Michelle said, Fuzzy was finally back home. If I didn't believe in miracles before, I do now. You have to admit that Michelle and Fuzzy's reunion is incredible, regardless of your belief in miracles. Although some may refer to it as luck, these occurrences are more often than you may imagine.